This is Mark Guerrero. Welcome to East L.A. Music Stories. My guest is Richard Morin, or Richard Morin, if you will, either way. Um, he played guitar and was a vocalist, and he was in the Enchantments in the early 60s, who were a very popular East L.A. group. And then he joined the tail end of my first band, Mark and the Escorts. And then we evolved into the Men from Sound, changing some personnel. And he was in that group. And then he left, and I don't remember how or why. And then he came back to the third lineup of the Men from Sound. There were three lineups of the Men from Sound between 66 and 68. And then he joined the Little Ray Review as a member of the Four Clefs. So we're going to talk about all that, plus his father, Raul Morin, who was a World War II veteran who wrote a book called Among the Valiant that talked about his experiences. Plus, he researched and found out all the Mexican Americans that won. Where would they win? With medal of what? What medals?
Congressional Medal of Honors and other awards, Bronze
Great.
Star, Silver Star, and so on.
Okay. Um, so welcome, Richard. It's been a long time coming.
Yeah, go back a long ways.
Yes, we do.
That was like
So,
60 years ago.
yeah, it's hard to believe.
Hate to say that.
So, what area of East LA did you grow up in?
Born in Boyle Heights, but at the age of 10, we moved to our new home track in Monterey Park. It was called Monterey Hills at the time, but it's
Okay.
not to be
Right.
confused with the one in El Sereno. But it
Now,
was behind East LA College.
now, when you lived in East LA, you lived close to the Brambilla family.
Yes, cousins. Well, Robert and Bobby were lived up the street from me. Bobby and Raul, as a matter of fact, their names are. But we used to play in the street, baseball and so on, football, till the lights came on and went home. And that's how we started a band together.
So, the Brambilla family is related to Steve and Rudy Salas because the Brambilla is on the
Yes,
mother's side. And so,
that's
did you
right.
meet the Salas brothers early on?
Did I meet them?
Hmm.
Yeah, I met them. But I also saw them at dances and so on. They
Hmm.
were cute. All the girls used to love them.
I
They
remember
were like
seeing,
10 and 12 years old.
I saw them like that too. And they were already very professional in look and
Yeah.
vocals.
And they used to play with the Jaguar. The Jaguars
Yes,
used to back them up.
that's right. So, how did you get into playing guitar and into music in general?
Well, Bobby knew that I played guitar, and they were playing guitar at Salesian, I think, or maybe Cantwell High School, and they started a little group, and they asked me if I wanted to sing. And I said, yeah, I knew a lot of Beatles songs and so on, and I knew a few chords. I taught myself some chords, and so I also took music lessons when I was young, piano and so on. But so then they liked my background, and I guess I could hold a note, so they asked me to be their lead singer.
And that was the Enchantments, right?
Yes, sir.
And where did you play with them? What venues? Do you remember?
Well, yeah, we played a lot of the popular ones. We played the Kennedy. We played weddings and parties, of course. We played in garages, played at quinceañeras. And the big time was when we went to the Little Union and played at the Little Union, the Kennedy, and so on, the Big Union. So we started making a name for ourselves and got popular. Uh, we we became good enough, I think, to go to the first teenage fair, and we took second place. And I was a singer at that time. I was replaced later on by Eddie Boy Serrano.
Right. And so at that time, you guys didn't make any records. It wasn't until Eddie joined that they made a record.
No, I never got into a recording studio with them.
Hmm.
Later on in my career, I did.
Do you have any memories of any particular gigs with the Enchantments and who else might have been on the bill? Were you on the bill with the Midnighters, say?
Well, yeah, we used to open for the Midnighters at one point, and yeah, in our group was a bunch of talent. Our first organ player was Bob Espinosa, who later on went to be the organist for El Chicano,
Yes.
Viva Tirado, and so on.
Hmm.
Our trumpet player and other singer was Bobby Rodriguez, and he and I sang duets. some Righteous Brothers songs and so on, like Talk About My Babe, not your baby, but my baby, and other songs. And so it was a good group. A lot of talent went through there.
And Bobby went on to get a PhD in music and still a
Yeah,
fantastic trumpet
and
player.
he was a professor at UCLA. I don't know if he still is,
Yeah.
but
Well, he,
I'm so proud just to have been associated with him.
I interviewed him for my second Zoom show, so he's the
I saw
contributor.
that. Yeah, it's great,
Who
great.
else was in the band? Do you have any other memories of who else was in the band?
Well, of course, Eddie Boy Serrano and other
Oh,
guys
but he
after me
wasn't
that
in. Was he? Were you in at the same time with him? At it?
no, not at the
No.
same
Well,
time.
I'm
He
talking about
replaced me.
when you were in it.
Oh,
Uh,
when I was in it,
with Bobby
uh,
Brambilla, of course.
Bobby Brambilla, right? Steve Lopez, Larry, I think his name is Gomez, our bass player. We had a drummer and a organ player, which I don't remember their names. I'm sorry.
Well, you mentioned Bobby Espinoza.
Right.
So you don't remember the drummer's name?
No, I believe his name was Tom.
Mhm.
I'm
Okay,
sorry, I don't
that's
remember
okay. We can't.
everybody.
Hey, we're lucky. We remember what we had for breakfast this morning. So,
Why I came into the room.
yeah, that's right. It happens all the time. Anything else you want to mention about the enchantments before we move on to Mark and the Escorts?
No, it was a learning experience, and we cut our teeth. We got burned a few times by playing at parties, and they wouldn't pay us, and so
Mhm.
on. We played one time at the Big Union, and we played with a group called Paul and Paula. You may remember, "Hey
Hey,
Paul, I Want to
Paula.
Marry You," that song,
Yeah.
right? Except Paula couldn't make it, so it was just Paul,
Oh.
right? So we had like a lot of little experiences like that, a lot of weddings and stuff.
Mhm.
Small time at first, when you're just starting out, you play anywhere,
And
a garage band, like they say,
how are you guys dressing? I know when they had Eddie Serrano, they were wearing those
silver sequin
vests.
suits. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we
Yeah.
started out with it was Beatles, and we got the Beatle coats without a collar, and they were
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
beaded,
Yeah.
and everybody had gray with black, and I had black with gray, and so
Nice.
we bought them right out of the store. So
Now, were you playing
yeah,
guitar with them too, or were you just a stand-up front guy?
no, never played guitar with the Enchantments.
Oh, that's
I
interesting.
should have.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So, um, your next group was my group, my first group, Mark and the Escorts. Now, we had already been together for a couple of years and gone
Yeah,
through a lot of different personnel. We went from a three-piece all the way up to a seven-piece. But you joined what I would call the tail end of Mark and the Escorts, but you did quite a few gigs with us as Mark and the Escorts. Do you have any particular memories of any gigs?
well, when I started, we there was a Trini Basuto and Richard Magana and Joe Cabral on organ,
Right.
and
Ernie and
we went
Richard.
from like a soul group. Yeah, Ernie and Richard, of course. Oh, the great Rick Rosas. I still remember him. But yeah, we did a lot of soul songs and so on. But then we started evolving more into like Beatles and the British invasion stuff. And I think that Trini and Joe and Richard Magana didn't quite fit at the time. And so they ended up leaving. I don't know how. But
Right.
that's when I think we started Men from Sound.
Right, right.
Yeah.
So, do you remember what uniforms we were wearing? I know one of the uniforms when you were in the band, and I got pictures of it. In fact, I'll show one, a great one now. Remember those seersucker coats that had the little stripes? They were kind of,
Yeah, yeah. I remember that. Right.
yeah. And I have a great picture of us playing at the Griffith Junior High Tower Queen dance as a
Right.
seven-piece, wearing those coats, young and looking
Yes.
cool. Yeah,
And we also played the Montebello Ballroom
yeah.
and with other groups like Little Ray and his group. And so we got a lot of exposure. We were going up. It was a good band. We started
Yeah.
developing a following. When we went to the Men from Sound, we had green corduroy jackets. You remember that?
Oh,
They
yeah.
were hot.
They were kind of
So
double-breasted.
yes, yes.
Yeah, yeah. Um, so did you play like the San Alphonsus or
St.
Big Beach?
Alfonso's, the Kennedy, um, the Montebello Ballroom,
Hmm.
VFWs, all of them, American
Yeah,
Legions, all of
yeah,
them.
yeah, yeah.
Uh, everywhere that would have the little union, the big union,
Oh, I think there's some
other
pictures of
places.
us also playing at the El Monte Community Center, and we were wearing
Okay.
we were wearing these blue velour kind of Beach Boys kind of shirts. Do you remember that?
Okay, I think so if I see it.
But you know,
I also remember one time we played at the what was it, Glendale Civic Center, or was that Burbank
I
with
don't
Peaches and
remember.
Herb?
I don't remember that one.
You remember Peaches and Herb,
I remember them, but I don't remember the gig. Yeah.
the venue? Huh?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Now
and
here's
then
a
we
bit.
also played, of course, Alhambra High School with
Oh, yes,
Stan
yes, yes.
Bells.
Okay, but that's the Men from Sound. But that's what I want to try to
Okay, right,
clarify with you
right,
as best as we can is that the line between Mark and the Escorts and the Men from Sound is blurred, like in terms of were we when we wore those blue velour things, was it the Men from Sound or was it still Mark and the Escorts? As a matter of fact, Richard Mahara was in the band when we were wearing those coats and you were still in the
must have
band.
been the Men from Sound, huh?
I think it was the
Right,
Men
right.
from
They were
Sound.
pullovers, right?
Yeah, that must have been Men
Hmm.
from Sound. Uh,
Uh-huh.
yeah, so now you joined the band after we made the records, after we made Get Your Baby and Dance With Me. It was after that you joined.
Right,
Um,
right.
so we had that little period of you and Mark and the Escorts. And do you remember what songs you might have sung in the band at that time? And once
Played a
again, it's
lot of
hard
hits.
to determine between Men from Sound and you mentioned something about Drive My Car earlier.
Yeah. Um, we can work it out.
Yeah.
Sang that one. We can work it out. Um, can't really remember. Let me see. I got some notes here.
I think you sang some ballads too, kind of doo-wop ballads. I'm trying to remember which ones.
Yeah. Doo-wops, oldies, Buffalo Springfield,
Oh
Beatles,
God,
a lot of
yes.
stuff like that.
Buffalo Springfield, I think that came in with Men from Sound for sure. Um, okay, so yeah, I think it's going to be impossible to make that perfect clear line of what was what.
Right, right,
But I do remember this. What happened was um, one of the reasons we changed the name was because by the year 1966, the British invasion was in full swing, and names like Mark and the Escorts were passé. Like it
right,
wasn't
right.
cool. That was early 60s. So we changed the name
Hmm.
to the Men from Sound. And I remember part of how the name came about, but I want to get your memory. As far as I don't remember who came up with the name. I do remember I came up with the word sound because I had seen the Beatles at the Hollywood Bowl, and opening for them was a group called Sounds Incorporated.
Oh,
And I dug that,
okay.
And then the name came from the TV show The Man from Uncle. So we thought
Right,
we'll be the men from
right.
Sound, S period, O period, U period, N period, D period. So that's how we became that. Uh, Now, were you the one that made those band cards? Yeah, I know you were
Yeah,
selling those.
I had a made at a little print shop in City of Commerce.
And
The
I'll show that on the
the
screen.
fold over ones, yeah.
Yeah, I'll show that on the screen right now. But oh my God, I still have some of those. You
You
know,
do? I'd like to have some if you have them.
yeah, I'll mail one to you. But no, they were fantastic. They're kind of a little narrower than regular band cards and longer, and had the little fold over. And on the
Hmm.
fold over was a silhouette of John Lennon playing guitar.
Yeah,
And
yes,
the idea of that came from the show The Man from Uncle. There was like a silhouette of a guy with a gun. So we thought, well, we'll do
yes.
a silhouette of John with
Right,
a guitar.
right. Quite innovative. I
Yeah,
thought it was. It was
yeah.
clever,
And you did the print just like
catchy.
Man from Uncle, right? Sound looked like.
Yes. Uh-huh.
Now I do remember you came up with something, and I've mentioned it on other shows that, you know, um, sound with periods after every letter didn't really stand for anything. We just
Right,
made it pretend like Uncle probably
right,
stood for something.
right.
And you came up with the idea that sound stood for Society of Unusual Naked Dudes. Do you remember that?
I really said that.
You came up
I
with
wouldn't
that.
doubt it. I
Yeah.
wouldn't put it past me.
So that was our secret, what it really meant. Uh, the
What a memory.
things we remember, yeah. So as I say, the name changed because those kinds of names like Mark and the Escorts were kind of passé at that point. Because of that, that's when we let go of the sax players. We didn't need saxes at that
Right,
point. Trini left,
right.
and Richard Magana, who was playing baritone sax, he played rhythm guitar. So he stayed in
Hmm.
the band. Robert Warren was gone by then, and it was Ernie, Richard, me, you, and Magana, I believe. Um, And so the band had a whole different thing without the saxes. So we were a lot more,
Isn't that when Richard Moharo came, joined the group?
but not right away, in a
Not
little
at the
while.
inception, at least a
No,
little bit
not
after.
at the inception, because I remember rehearsing in my parents where I lived on McDonald Avenue in the living room, and I
Right.
distinctly, and we have photographs of that, which I will show one right now. There's a great
Mm,
photo of me, you, and Richard Magana around a mic singing. And
okay. Yeah.
so yeah, it was just us at first, and we did some gigs, and we started to do more sophisticated Beatles songs because Rubber Soul had just come out, and I
And
remember,
Buffalo Springfield.
oh, that was we were big on Buffalo Springfield, but as far as
Mr.
Beatles,
Soul, we used to do Mr. Soul. Oh, that was great.
we did Hung
Yeah,
Upside
really
Down
like it. Hung upside down,
and
right.
Bluebird. Uh,
Yeah, that was a good
yeah,
one.
that was a Buffalo Springfield was one of our big go-tos, and we were really good at it. And Ernie sang some of the leads as well.
Richie
Uh,
Furay is one of my Facebook friends.
oh yeah, yeah,
We
yeah.
follow each other. Yeah, we've got
Yeah,
a lot of
I
similar
got to meet
interests.
him when Richard was playing with the Buffalo Springfield reunion.
Is that right?
I went backstage and
That's so awesome.
Richard introduced me to Richie Foray, and he was really nice. We had a good talk.
Yeah, he's a great guy.
Yeah.
Uh,
But let's get back to Beatles. So that was Buffalo Springfield, which was a major influence at the time. But Beatles, we were doing The Word from Rubber Soul. It's the word
yes.
love. In the
Hmm.
beginning, I misunderstood, but now I've got it. The word is good. And we had all the
Mm,
harmonies down, three-part harmonies.
yes.
And then we did a real obscure one from Rubber Soul called Wait. And I remember you were on rhythm
Right.
guitar, and it had a like a volume thing, like wah 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 wah, and that was before volume pedals. So we had to actually turn.
Right.
And I remember, I think you did that part of wah wah, you know, and uh, and that had some great three-part harmonies. So we were getting a little more
Yeah.
musically sophisticated, and we are sounding pretty darn good.
I
Before,
know we had a following. I remember we used to go play at gigs, and there was the same people at different places where
yeah,
we played every week,
yeah,
every week. So it was kind of gratifying that way, just to
absolutely,
know that people appreciated us and that we were some. I thought we were something different. We
yeah,
weren't just your old Motown and rhythm and blues, but we
yeah,
did the British stuff,
yeah.
which later on caught on, I guess.
Yeah. Oh,
And I
yeah.
really like that.
A lot of the East L.A. bands did stuff like that, but not everybody did British Invasion. Not everybody did Beatles, but enough. Quite a few groups did. But then Richard Moharo joined. Now, Richard Moharo
Yes.
is quite an interesting character. He was way younger than us. Like, I think he was like 2 years younger than me. So I might have
Mhm.
been 16, you know, and he was like barely 15, maybe 14.
Yeah.
But he was
Well,
real mature for his age. He was already he was already, I think, drinking. He was doing stuff that a lot of
yeah.
people were
Yeah.
not
Oh,
doing,
drugs were
and drugs
a
probably.
scourge from a lot
Yeah,
of people in the rock
right.
and roll scene.
But
Yeah.
he was talented. He could sing. He had a real cool image. He used to wear like Levi's and sort of Bob Dylan boots, and he
Yeah.
looked really
Yeah.
cool. And he was in the band when we changed uniforms into the those velour things I mentioned earlier. But when he first joined it, see, I'm confused again, that whole transition, because he might have been at the tail end of Mark and the Escorts too.
No, I don't think he
He
was.
wasn't. I just remember,
No.
were you in the band? I distinctly remember playing St. Alphonsus Hall, and at this time we forgot about uniforms. We finally decided no more uniforms. Let's
Go
just be
casual.
just we each dressed as individuals like the Rolling Stones did. So I remember playing San Alfonso's where we all dressed individually, and he was all dressed real funky like Bob Dylan or something, and playing
Mhm.
harmonica and singing Spider and the Fly by the Stones. And that was
He
his
was
big
gifted
moment.
on the harmonica
Yeah.
too.
So were you in the band when we did that? Do you know?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
At one stage it was me, Richard, and I believe Steve Verdugo. Were we all in it together?
That was
Do you
later.
recall that?
Okay. Yeah, that was
Later.
the next
Okay.
chapter.
Yeah.
Okay. So I just want to make sure we got all this down. Oh, another thing from this era, the first era of the Men from Sound, is we played at the big union and we got to back up Mr. Dobie Gray.
Yeah, I remember that.
And Dobie Gray was a big star. He had a huge hit called In Crowd. I'm in with the In Crowd.
Hmm.
And for some reason, we were selected to back him up. Now, the Midnighters were playing that night. There was a whole bill. I'll show the flyer
It
right.
was our manager. Who's our manager? Was it Eddie Davis or Billy
Billy
Cardenas?
Cardenas, Billy Cardenas.
Yeah.
Maybe it was
Yeah.
him. But
Yeah.
but the Midnighters are on the bill. I'm going to show the flyer right now. And
Okay.
but for however it happened, might have been because of Billy. We were selected to back him up, and he actually came to our rehearsal. Now, I don't know if you remember that. Do you
The
remember that?
Spanish American Hall, yes.
Was that in Montebello?
You was at the, yes, on 20th Street, the Spanish American Hall.
Okay. Yeah, he here this grown man star, Dobie Gray,
Hmm.
shows up at a rehearsal. We're just a bunch of 16-year-old kids, 15 and 16.
Yeah.
And and we backed him up well. He didn't complain. He played with us that night. And I remember we did Hitchhike by Marvin Gaye. We did In Crowd.
Right.
Do you remember
Mhm.
any of the other songs we did with him?
Not offhand, no.
Yeah. But
But I know those are two big ones.
we have photographs of us backing him up. However, I'm off camera. I'm not in the pictures.
Ah,
There's a couple where you can see my guitar neck, maybe a
uh-huh.
little part of
Yeah,
me, but you're right
yeah,
there, right next to him, and I think Ernie's in
yeah.
it, maybe Richard, maybe even Maharo, I don't remember, but I'm not in the frame. But I'll show a couple of those pictures, or at least one of them. But that was a great memory, the fact that we were able to pull that off at such a young age, pretty cool. And it was pretty cool of
Yeah,
him to show up at our rehearsal, and he was real nice to us. He wasn't
yeah. Yeah.
arrogant in any way. Yeah, it was very
He
cool.
really went on to be a big hit with that other one he had,
Drift Away,
Drift Away. Yeah,
a
that
few
was
years
his
later.
mega hit.
Yeah, mega hit. Okay, so that was the first Men from Sound. Okay. Now, I don't remember why you left, but you were gone. Um, let's see. Magana had gone, Richard Magana. And the second phase of Men from Sound, which was a great band, was me, Richard, and Ernie, as usual. Ernie Hernandez, Rick Rosas. Um, but we had George Ochoa of the Slauson Brothers.
Right. Yeah.
Became a frontman lead singer with us, and a great singer.
Uh-huh.
And we had a great keyboard player named Tony Rodas, who was a trained pianist. I mean, he was doing classical. He was really good. And so that
Wow.
was a killer band, and we got very popular. We played quite a
You've
bit.
always attracted top talent,
Yeah, man,
and
somehow worked
I,
out.
I lay that to your credit because you're not only a good recruiter, but you recognize talent and you develop talent and you coordinate it so well that it all comes together and gels
Yeah.
just right. I salute you on that.
Well, thank you very much. Well, that was a great band, and that was a second phase of the Men from Sound, and that lasted maybe a year, and we played every weekend, and we were very popular. And then George left, and I don't even remember sometimes why people leave, but bottom line is he was no longer in the group, and Tony Rodas was no longer in the group, and
Mhm.
somehow you came back into the group, and then that's when Steve Verdugo joined the group. So the third phase of the Men from Sound was me, Ernie, and Richard, you, and Steve Verdugo. And my memories
Okay,
of that group, and that's when we were wearing those double-breasted corduroy coats. My memory of that group was I remember we played this gig in Northridge. We have some pictures of that. And we were doing some Beatles stuff from Magical Mystery Tour. This was 1968. And we used to do Roll Up for the Mystery Tour, Roll Up, and I think Fool on the Hill. And, we had good harmonies because we had four singers with Steve, you, me, and Ernie. So we had some nice vocals. And that phase probably lasted 6 months. And then you and Steve were gone, and then we got Tony Rodas back. And at that time, we changed our name again
interesting.
to 1984, named after the George Orwell book. Because once again, you know, uh, it was more suited to that era because the psychedelic era came in with Cream and Jimi Hendrix and all that stuff. We changed our name to 1984. So
Do you
that's
ever remember, Mark?
what
You ever remember we did a gig at the Montebello Park Auditorium, the amphitheater, and we sang "I'm So Glad."
I don't really remember that well, but I do remember when we would do "I'm So Glad" by Cream.
Yeah, Yeah.
We were doing Sunshine
We
of Your
did it
Love.
because the words were easy.
Is that it? I'm
Yeah.
so glad.
And
I'm
the
so
background harmony was easy too. So
I'm glad
I
I'm
thought it came off rather well. Some of our best appearances were when we ad-lib. Like, do you remember we did a juvenile hall in
yes.
Downey, Los Padrinos, and we
Yes.
sang um, the
A lot
one
of,
by
we did a lot of
what did we
Buffalo
sing?
Springfield that night. I remember that day.
Expressway to Your Heart.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Remember that?
Yeah, they
That
sound
really came out. We hit it big with that one. It was just the first time we ever played it.
and remember that was a group that was trying to sound like the Young Rascals. They sounded just like the Young Rascals.
Yeah, right, right.
Expressway,
Yeah,
not the best way.
so
Yeah.
there's a lot to be said for ad lib impromptu.
Yeah, yeah.
I think that's where your real talent shows off.
But we were doing Buffalo Springfield. I remember doing Hung Upside Down from their second album and
Uh-huh.
Mr. Soul and Bluebird. And we would do these long solos. And by the way, I have to say
Yeah.
this, it's really sad how some musicians age, but I just saw a clip of Neil Young and Stephen Stills like 2 weeks
Uh-huh.
ago doing Hung
Yeah.
Upside Down, and it was terrible.
Uh-huh.
It was horrible. It was,
Yeah.
you gotta, I
Yeah.
mean, Stephen Stills, he was one of the
You
greatest.
just can't recapture. You can't
No.
recapture
But
the glory
Stills
days.
was one of the greatest singer-songwriters of the
Yeah.
60s and
Yeah.
70s. Genius, incredible. But he
Mhm.
also abused substances, alcohol and
Oh
drugs for
yeah,
many years.
like many of us did.
Yeah. So he's lost his voice and you watch that thing and it's kind of sad. Um, but we did it. We could do it today better than they sounded last week, believe me.
We also did Spooky. Remember that?
Oh yeah, and you sang
In the
it.
still of the evening. Yes.
You sang
Yeah.
it. Oh yeah. No, I was going to say that another memory is remember when we used to rehearse in my mom's garage in Monterey
Hmm.
Park.
Yeah.
And at the time, the band's record, Music from Big Pink, was out. So we called the garage Big White. And we were doing stuff
Yeah.
like
How
Nights in White
funny.
Satin by the Moody
How
Blues.
funny. Yeah.
But
Yeah. I remember those days.
we were writing songs by then. And
Yeah.
I remember you wrote two songs, and you might be blown away that I remember the songs. One of them was called Another Girl. Da 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 da, another girl. Da, da, da.
Right. Yeah, I
A
remember that
nice
one.
little song, a nice kind of ballad. And you wrote another one, kind of a little bit of a rocker, and it was called something about Leland.
Uh-huh.
You remember that one?
Sort of, yeah. They weren't real big on my, never
Yeah.
went anywhere with those.
But Another Girl is pretty cool.
I didn't save any of that stuff.
You don't have any
My life was in
tapes?
a fog.
We have a tape of Another Girl somewhere, you
Is
know?
that right?
Yeah, and it sounds pretty good. If I find it,
Uh,
if it's an MP3, Ernie might have it. But yeah, it's nice. No, I was just assuming I have another memory. Now, you were and are a little bit older. So I remember like that second phase of the Men from Sound, I was around 18, and I believe you were like 20 and a couple of years older. And you were
yeah,
even
maybe.
married, right?
Yes.
The way you
Yes.
said that.
Well, it was a mistake. I got married for the wrong reasons, and as you know, I had a lot of marital problems, and plus, the drinking and partying and the music scene didn't help it any,
Yeah.
and so that kind of ruined that for me.
Do you remember
And
where you were
so,
living? Where was that house?
well, I lived in a couple of places, mostly City Terrace.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, we were
yeah,
at your
City Terrace.
house. I remember distinctly there was a party at your house, and Ernie was
Hmm.
there, I was there, Richard was there, and we were sitting around playing guitars. And like to you, because you were married and living on your own,
Hmm.
and we were still teenagers living at home, you were like, Richard's a man. He's he's older than us. But yeah, it seemed very mature at the time.
I was still very immature. Yeah,
Do you remember that party at all, by any chance?
nah, in the fog. No,
Yeah, yeah. Um,
had a few.
yeah, right, right. Let's talk about before we get out of those teenage years, when you were young, and tell me exactly when it happened, but you got in trouble and you wound up at Boys Republic, which was kind of like a juvenile hall of some kind.
Oh, that was before anything having to do with music. Um, I was an incorrigible kid. I always wanted my way, as you may have noticed sometimes. And I always wanted to get involved in different things, drugs and so on. And so, because of my incorrigible situation, it was decided that I would go to a boys' home out in Chino, Boys
Mhm.
Republic. And so I was there the whole year of 1963, from January to January. I should have stayed longer, but I refused to stay after a year. It was, it was a self-commitment. And so, but it was an interesting stay. I learned a little bit about leadership, about self-responsibility, about discipline, and so on. I also got a chance to meet Steve McQueen, as you might know. And Steve came over one day, and he was a former member, a former student resident at Boys Republic, and he was just finished making The Great Escape. He came over with his first wife, Neil. I forgot her last name, but she was his wife, Neil Adams. And he spent a whole day with the boys, and we showed him around and escorted him. I happened to live in the same dorm that he had been a resident of. And so Life magazine photo op the whole thing and shot scenes of my bedroom with us sitting around the bed talking to Steve McQueen. And so that was one of the great occasions of my life, knowing him. I was also there when President Kennedy got assassinated. And I can recall vividly going to the cottage and having the supervisor ask me if I'd help him lower the flag. And so that day will always stand out in my memory, as it will for many people. But everybody remembers exactly where they were when that happened. So when I got out, that's when I started, fooling around with the guitar and learning songs and so on. And about this time, Bobby Brambilla and I started getting together and uh, forming a band. So it came fresh off of that.
Do you still have a photo of the Steve McQueen shot anywhere?
There's a Time magazine. Is it Time or it's Life? Life magazine, August 23rd issue. And it's in there. And I do have the photos. I could shoot them to you if you like.
Please do. I'll
Yeah.
post it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
Well, that's great, man.
Yeah.
Glad I remembered that. Oh, let's get back to the that juvenile hall gig again. At the what was it called, Las Padrinas or something like that?
Los Padrinos in Downey.
Yeah, it was
Right.
it was a girls' juvenile hall, all girls.
Was it?
Yes, it was all girls, and or at least we were
I
playing for
guess
the
it was. Yeah, I
yeah,
remember now. Yeah.
yeah, and they were so excited that some guys came in, and they were like, like we were the Beatles, and they were looking
Huh?
at us like raw meat, because they'd been locked up. But it was pretty
I don't
heavy
know why
duty.
I don't remember that. Huh?
Oh, I remember that. Yeah, it was pretty exciting. So, we were in the band when we played Chino Prison? Mark and the Escorts played Chino Prison, and my dad was with us.
Can't say that I was.
Yeah, yeah,
No, I wasn't.
yeah. So we played some.
Go to all these venues. Huh?
Yeah, man. Um, so now see, so I think we finished with the men from Sound. So yeah, that third phase with Steve Verdugo and you, that
It was
ended.
in between the first and second Men from Sounds that I was with Little Ray in the
Was
review.
that when that was?
Yeah, so if you'd
Okay.
like to talk about that.
Okay, yeah, please. So at that time, you joined up with the Little Ray Review. So Little Ray was probably the most popular, or one of the two most popular
Oh,
artists
he
in
was
East
a
L.A.
king of East L.A. for a
Yeah, man,
while.
the guy,
Yeah,
great singer, great performer, great dancer, just
yeah,
amazing. Could sing
yeah.
any style. R&B is a forte, but he was a
Yeah.
huge star in East LA. And he started out, he was in the Midnighters for a while with Willie G.
Right, right.
And then he formed his own group, Little Ray and the Progressions, and they were very popular for a while.
Hmm.
And then he came up with this idea to create the Little Ray Review, like the Motown Review. So so he had the Progressions, but then he came up with this idea of having two vocal groups, like four-piece vocal groups, I believe, in the review, the Epics and the Four Clefs. And you were in the Four
Yes.
Clefs, correct?
But the funny thing about them was there was only three of them.
Oh,
Me and
really?
Frank Paz and David Felix.
And it's
Yes.
still billed as the Four Clefs.
Right.
Okay.
Well, the Clefs. I just met up with Ray and I knew him from high school. We'd taken a drama class together
Hmm.
and of course we followed his music career because he was out same venues that we were, or we were at the same venues he was. And uh, so, anyways, when he had the need, and I happened to be in the right place at the right time, and he recognized me, and I auditioned and got the part with the Clefs,
Yeah.
and that was a lot of fun. We did Motown, we did the Impressions, we did three-part harmonies, and we got into a little bit of dancing, the Showtime type of stuff, and that was a short part of my show career. The way we broke up was that we were supposed to go to New York and join up, and Ray had connections with a guy named Seymour Stein in New
Right.
York,
Remember.
and Cannibal and the Headhunters was there in New York at the same time, and at the time Eddie Boy and George Ochoa were with Cannibal in New York, and so we had a connection there, and so I went, and the idea is that we were going to meet up together with David and Frank and get our start and get introduced there and start doing things in New York. But the funny thing is, they never showed up. They never came. I hitched a ride to get there. I got a plane ticket and got a ride halfway. And so when I got there, there was nowhere to stay. So I stood with Cannibal and the Headhunters at the time. I even, uh, I was even considered to join the group, but I really didn't want to join them and they didn't want me, I think. I just didn't like fit in with that scene.
So when you went there and stayed with them, was Scar and Rabbit or any of those guys in the band, or was it already
Oh, they
just
were
Eddie and
gone. They
George?
were
It was
gone.
just Eddie and
It
George, right?
was just George and Eddie Boy
Yeah.
and another guy by the name of Tommy. I can't remember his last name, but
Well, I went to visit my brother that year in New York. He was living there in
is that right?
1968, and I got together with George when he was there,
Huh?
and I met him at the
Okay.
apartment. I met him at the
At the
apartment.
same time,
Yeah,
right there on
yeah,
57th Street.
yeah, yeah. And I saw Eddie. Eddie, when I was
Let me
walking
tell you
through.
something about that hotel,
Okay.
Mark. That hotel appears in the Godfather movie
Oh, really?
when, yes, when Al Pacino slaps his wife for having an abortion. Remember that scene?
Hmm.
They went into the hotel downstairs. You could see it's the Martha Washington Hotel,
Oh, wow.
and it's not there anymore. But anyways,
Yeah,
that was my relationship to it.
yeah,
Just interesting little trivia notice.
yeah, yeah. Well,
So,
when I arrived there, I took the subway and I'm walking toward the hotel. Eddie
uh-huh,
Serrano just happened to be walking the opposite direction. And George and
uh-huh.
I took the subways and hung out all over New York and
Awesome, son.
18-year-olds hanging out in New York City.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
but I never did get into the apartment, so I didn't see Cannibal on that trip. But yeah, so that was
Uh-huh.
68. So that was the year you were there. Yeah, yeah.
So that's as far as that went. And
Yeah.
since Frank and Dave didn't come over, I ended up getting a job in a print shop there to earn enough money to get a plane ticket back. But
Wow.
before that, Cannibal got us into Central Park to see Smokey Robinson concert. And
Nice.
so since he knew Smokey, we went backstage to be with Smokey and hang out for a couple of hours and just shoot the
Cool.
breeze and so on. And so I got to meet Smokey Robinson and all the Miracles at the time. And
Wow.
so it was a good, interesting thing about that concert was that it ended in a riot. The audience got so enthusiastic when Smokey went into his routine with Mickey's Monkey and dancing on the stage and so on, like he does. The audience wanted to rush up and join him and get on the stage too. He stopped the show a couple of times, said, "No, I can't have this. I can't do that." But they kept on doing it. So he said, "Okay, the show's over." They packed up, they picked up their instruments, they walked off stage. The audience was incensed. I mean, they blew it. They ran out of the. It was in Central Park. They ran out of the venue and went all down to downtown New York, and there was a riot that year. It was a
Wow.
summer of riots. I don't know if you remember, but that was
Oh, yeah.
1968, I believe.
Yeah.
And so I'll always remember that riot because I was there when it started. And
Wow.
so it was an experience. I don't even know if Smokey remembers that, but I'll never forget it.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
So getting back to the Four Clefs, now I have three
Mhm.
flyers here I'm going to
So
show.
that's how that ended.
Okay. I have three flyers here that I'm going to show. And
Okay.
one of them, Rock and Roll Show Laguna Park on Whittier Boulevard, which is now Ruben
That's
Salazar Park.
before. I'll tell you a little story about that too.
Okay, go ahead.
The riot at Salazar Park. Yeah.
Joe, tell me. Oh, yeah. So the moratorium.
It's after I was with the Solace Brothers in the six pack. So
Okay.
basically, to
Well,
make a long story short, we went there and I was with my daughter and a couple of friends. And of course, the riot broke out. Police were beating people. and throwing tear gas and so on. My brother Tom took a flare and lit the police car on fire. You could see it on the magazine, billowing smoke up into the sky. That my brother Tom did that. There's a picture you might see of some police carrying a fellow policeman by the arm because he's unconscious. That was me. I hit that policeman. Uh, I seen him and he was striking a civilian senseless. He kept on hitting him and hitting him. So I just didn't like that. So I had a placard and I just hit him once on the back. But I guess he was afraid and defensive. He went into a ball. And so that's all I did. But his fellow sheriff's officers picked him up and carried him out of that. But I'm the one that was responsible for that. I hope it's safe to say that.
Well,
I
they
hope the
call
statute of limitations is over.
right, but
I've
no,
got
but
pictures of that. I'll send you the picture.
okay, but
And
they
so after that riot, Mark, I felt so, I don't know, not patriotic, but Chicano activists that I told Rudy and Stevie that I could no longer sing with them. I'm gonna get more involved in that and in my marriage. And so I resigned from the six pack after that. I should have never did that.
I was going to say that was recognized as a police riot. I mean, they started
Yeah,
going in there and
yeah.
beating up women and children and
Yeah, we're
clubbing
out of
people.
control.
Yeah, there's no. Then they killed Ruben Salazar.
Killed Ruben Salazar.
Yeah. So, so getting back to this, and I thought of another thing we forgot, and that is we got to
Uh-huh.
get back to the men from Sound because we got to talk about the Standells. But before we do
Okay.
that, getting back to this flyer, Rock and Roll Show Laguna Park, Little Ray Review featuring Little Ray, the Rayettes, that was a female group, the Rayettes,
Reyes, there you go.
the
I remember
Epics,
them.
and the Four Clefs. So it did say Four Clefs, even though you
It
might have
was
been
called the
three.
Four Cliffs, right?
Yes,
Well, we always had the name, but there was never four,
that's
as
funny.
far
That's
as I
good.
remember.
That's good. The Fabulous Progressions, the Nightlighters, New Generations, Prophets, Centurions, and Red Velvets, June
Okay.
12th, 1966. And here's another one. This is the Royal Counts present Back to School Dance. And this is at the, I believe, Huntington Park Ballroom. And it's Little Ray Review, Epics, Rayettes, Four Clefs, Progressions, the Men from Sound. So you could have been in our band at this time. I don't know.
Was that the dance that ended in a riot when people
I don't
started throwing
know.
chairs?
Another riot. I know
I
that
remember
Montebello
that.
Ballroom, that would always happen. I'm not sorry. The CYO Hall, that would happen a lot. Did you play the CYO Hall with us?
Yes, yes, I did.
A lot of fights there. Chairs flying. Uh,
Sorry.
anyway, so yeah, so here's one with the Four Clefs and the Men from Sound on the same flyer. So you could
Hmm.
have been with us at the time. I don't know, or them. Maybe them, because maybe.
Maybe them because they had four at the time, I guess.
So you might have been with them at that time, but that would have been interesting that we were playing there and you were in another group there. But I guess we'll never know which band you were singing with that night. But
A lot of that period, Mark, to be honest, was a fog to me. I was so involved in drugs and stuff, getting high. I spent my time running around with druggies and, trying to find drugs. It was really like a time of turmoil for my life. And you could tell my music went down. I was not really cutting it. And it was just evident. The
so
marriage fell apart.
so what kind of drugs were you taking, by the way, if you don't mind me asking?
Well, you name it, and I took it.
Downers,
I took every drug you could possibly mention, including
downers,
opium, peyote, heroin, uppers, downers, psychedelics, pot, peyote, whatever. Only thing I haven't taken that I can't think of is PCP and fentanyl.
right.
But everything else I've at least tried, and some I indulged in a lot.
But that's an interesting mix because a lot of those things you mentioned are hallucinogens, which have
Right,
nothing to do with
right,
narcotics. Those are mind
right.
expanding different thing.
But still, they mess you up. They mess
Yeah,
your
especially if you're
personality up.
combining them with everything. But did
Yeah.
you do Coke? Or was that not in yet?
Yes. Yes. Of course.
And probably downers, reds, or
And speed.
speed.
Yeah. Never did crack.
Well, I don't think it had
Too
come out
bad.
yet. It hadn't been invented yet.
No.
But anyway, okay. So then that's that gig. And then the other one I have, and this is at East L.A. College Auditorium, and it was a rock and roll show for the benefit of the farm workers. A
That was
delightful
before,
performance.
wasn't it?
Well, I don't know. Well, we're not doing these necessarily in order, but you were in the Four
Oh.
Clefs at this time. That's why I'm bringing it up now.
Hmm. Hmm.
So It says starring Little Ray and his review. Also, the Enchantments, Teen Fair Champs. So they were on the bill there with Eddie
Well, that was
Serrano.
with Eddie Boy. They were Teen Fair champs.
And then they misspelled our name. Instead of the men from Sound, they put the man from Sound, like if it's one guy.
Or the Man of Sound, or
Yeah,
they
they
call us
sometimes they say
everything.
man of sound, men of sound. They were always screwing it up. Okay, the Righteous Rhythms, the Centurions, the Epics, the Gems, the Royal Topics, the Clefs. So here it is without the four on it. So it said
Okay.
four clefs on these
Okay.
two. It says the Clefs. Uh, and Little Michael J. December's Children, the Progressions, and the Rayettes.
Everybody was little at that
Yeah.
time.
Sunday, October 30th in the afternoon from 2 to 6. Donation $1.75. So yeah. So that's one of the challenges, getting everything in its proper sequence. But I think we've done a pretty good job. But if we jumped around, it's because sometimes it's hard to unravel exactly the timeline of
All
it.
right.
So getting back to the timeline, when we were talking about the third version of the Men from Sound that you were in, uh, we played a cool gig at Alhambra High School Auditorium where we
All
opened
right.
for the Standells, who were a big hit band at
Right.
the time with their hit Dirty Water. And
Hmm.
I will show that poster right now. And also opening was a group called it was Kenny Loggins' group. Kenny Loggins was in the group. And
Oh, really?
yeah, yeah. And I can't think of the name right now.
I didn't remember that.
Let me take a quick look. Okay, I'm going to pause. Kenny Loggins' group was called the Second Helping. And so, we didn't
Okay.
know he was
Well, I
going to
never
be
knew.
famous. Yeah, he was going to be famous later, but
Yeah, I never knew Kenny Loggins was there.
yeah,
I gigged with Kenny Loggins.
yeah, there you go.
That's another feather in my cap.
There you go. Now, I remember there's a few pictures of that show, but they're from real far away and they're a little blurry. So I may or may not show one of those pictures. But I do remember the stage, the auditorium, but I don't remember anything else. I don't even remember seeing the Standells. Do you remember seeing them?
I was high. I remember that. I was high. And
Which,
so because of that, I probably played lousy and didn't do well. And I don't remember anything about it except that the occasion.
what happened after you left to the Four Clefs and what did you do?
Well, like I said, I came back to the Men from Sound. That was sandwiched in between
Right, right.
Men
So
from
after
Sound.
after the Men from Sound.
But well, after the Men from Sound, uh, I I was working, and then I got a scholarship program to go to UCLA. It was called the High
Nice.
Potential Program, and I placed in a essay contest. And because of that, they gave me it was high potential equal opportunity for low
Income.
high risk
Oh,
populations and so on. And so I was at UCLA for a while, but I was on drugs, Mark, and I could
mm,
not handle it. I got D's on everything. If I passed, I was only there for 2 quarters. But the thing about that was that I was walking down Gailey Avenue one afternoon, and lo and behold, right next to me is Mario Paniagua. And
wow.
of course, he's a guitar player for the Jaguars.
Right, right.
And I said, I remember you. Did you play with the Jaguars? And he said, yeah, of course, and blah, blah, blah. And so to make a long story short, he said, are you still interested in playing music? I said, yeah. Because what happened was the band that Rudy and Stevie Salas was in uh, was called the Six Pack. And two of their players, the guitar player and piano, had quit at the same time, or they had a fallout or whatever. But he asked me if I'd like to audition for that. And by this time, I was playing piano and guitar, and so I went and auditioned, and that's how I ended up in a group with Rudy and Stevie Salas before their Tierra days.
Right.
And so we became known as the Six Pack, but as you can count, there was only five of us. So
We had trouble with mathematics in those days, the three cliffs.
let me describe UCLA for you, my UCLA experience.
Okay.
It was an interesting time. I met Angela Davis. It was a time when Wooden was going strong, and Kareem Abdul Jabbar was known as
Wow.
um, what was his name?
Lou Alcindor.
Lou Alcindor. Lou
Yeah.
Alcindor.
Yeah.
And I marched with Cesar Chavez at the Westwood store against the grape growers, and I I was very active in uh, activism, But when I joined with Rudy and Stevie, I quit. I just quit UCLA, and it was a big mistake. I should have stood it, but I
Mhm.
was not able to handle it, especially on drugs. And so that's why how I ended up with the Solace Brothers and the Six Pack. So that's
So when
all.
you were with them, were you on drugs still, or did you stop?
Uh, Not so much, I don't think, because I felt like a more positive time of my life, and I had a goal and an aim. At the time, the drummer was George Salazar, who used to be the drummer for the
Yes.
Midnighters,
Hmm.
and Anthony Beaver, forget his last
Bass
name,
player.
bass player, he used to play with the Jaguars. Do you remember his last name?
Yeah, let's see,
You remember him?
Tony. Yeah, yeah, he passed away a couple of years ago.
We did a lot of gigs. You want me to tell you about the six pack?
Yes, yes. And were you with them when they made
Yeah.
a record? Didn't they make a record?
We made a record, it didn't go anywhere. It was called Bring Them On Home against the Vietnam War. And it was produced by Eddie Davis. But we did a lot of gigs. I can't remember too much about them. Let me look at my notes. We did a gig in San Gabriel one time at this restaurant where afterwards the crowd was heckling us and telling us we played crummy and stuff like that. And so George picked up I forget what it was, a brick, and broke somebody's car window. We got in a small scale riot in the parking lot at the Delray uh, bar there. And so that was a memorable experience. And like I said, after the riot at Laguna Park, I thought I couldn't go on with them, and I quit. Another mistake I made. I was quitting everything is I had wrong priorities. I didn't have any direction, and so combination of drugs, my wrecked family life, and everything just ruined my musical career. After that, that was about it. Except I played with a little small group called the Mob out of Huntington Park. And so my career was pretty much shot. It really ended when I got arrested for possession of 2 pounds of heroin. And so I got convicted. I was looking at a 2 to 10 years prison sentence. And they said they would mitigate that and dismiss it if I would attend a drug recovery home. So I said, "Oh yeah, why not? I'll do that, and I'll get out and I'll continue my drug career." So while I was there in a place called Cry Help in North Hollywood, I met Danny Trejo. He was one of the sponsors and the trustees at that organization. And at the time, he was not an actor. He was just an ex-convict. He really was a convict out of San Quentin. And he used to tell these prison stories all the time about lighting the Christmas tree on fire, or guys that were tough on the daytime, but they were crying at nighttime because they were so lonely. And he was a very popular, and later on, after that, they recruited him to act in a movie because he looked like an ex-convict, which he really was. He was a boxing champion in the prison system because he was a boxer. And so that's how his career got launched. And at the time, he asked me, I told him we're going to stop going to AA meetings because I started going to church. I had found the Lord at that time. I started wanting to serve the Lord, and I wanted to get my family to be more cohesive and stable, as you know. And I was clean from drugs, and so this was a good time for me to do that. He asked me at the time, Rich, are you thankful to God for the AA and NA program, a 12-step program, or are you thankful to the 12-step program for finding God? And I didn't know what to answer him at the time, but since then, I realized, of course, that I have to thank God because God is a person. God has given me his son Jesus to die for my sins. God has given me stability in my family and blessed me with eternal life, a church family, and answers to my prayers, and everything else that God has given me. And I'll be eternally grateful to him. And so that kind of put an end on my career because I remember I started trying to audition with Tierra. And as I was singing it, my heart was not in it. I just could not go on because I wanted to serve God. There's a song called I'd Rather Have Jesus. And a line from that goes like this: I'd rather have Jesus than worldly applause. I'd rather be faithful to his dear cause. I'd rather have Jesus than worldwide fame. I'd rather be true to his holy name. And since then, I haven't wanted to be back in bands or anything like that anymore, but just to sing for the Lord in church and choirs, solos, and stuff like that. That's the extent of my musical career. Interestingly enough, when I was 30 years of age, I had a stroke, and I lost the use of my arm, my fingers, my sensitivity. A lot of it has come back, but I still don't play guitar. And so the Lord took that away from me because he's got other purposes for me. And 50 years ago, I started teaching a Sunday school class, and that's I've been doing that ever since. If you can see the books on my wall, those are all my Bible research books. And I live to serve the Lord, and He's been good to me, and I can't deny that. So there was my musical career in a nutshell.
Did you become a principal of some high school or what was it? What school were you?
I was a teacher at Reseda High School for 10 years, and I taught social studies, world history, U.S. history, economics, government, and so on. I turned stone conservative, Mark. I'm sorry.
It's all right. It's
Because I'm a
America.
Christian now, and I recognize like a lot of falsehood and a lot of scams that are going on.
Right, right.
But I was a principal for 1 year at a Christian academy, but they broke up for financial reasons. So now I've been teaching Sunday school for 50 years, and I taught through about 40 books of the Bible, and I like to be faithful to that. So that's my career now, and I'm glad I wouldn't have it any other way.
So when did you retire from regular work, if you have?
Um, I was only 60. I retired as soon as I could because I didn't like the system, LA Unified School District. There's a lot of garbage that goes along with the district. And so I stood in there as long as I could to retire and get my benefits. And so I have my pension and I got out. So now my wife and I like to travel. We've been to Europe 3 times and just our family. We live for our grandkids and children.
Nice. So let's talk about your dad. So your
Oh,
dad
okay, yeah.
was a World War II veteran,
Hmm.
and he wrote a book called Among the Valiant, where he tells his story.
Yes.
But he also talks about Mexican Americans who have won what kind of awards again? Medal of Honor.
The, uh, the Mexican American has the most Congressional Medal of Honors, 17, than any other ethnic minority. And at the time, it was only 17. I think it's up to like 33 now or more. And so they're a very courageous group, and they're very loyal, and they'll defend our country. And they're very patriotic on a whole. And so he discovered that, and because of that, he came back and found out that there was a lot of discrimination, and there was not a lot of political involvement. So he got active in politics, and he started helping people like Edward R. Roybal become a congressman, Judge Leo Sanchez. I don't know if you remember these names.
Yeah.
He became the first judge in East L.A. And other people like Gloria Molina and Richard Alatorre and Richard Torres, they followed because my dad helped open the door for political involvement. And so I like to say that he was, instrumental, but God used a lot of people in that. And so finally today the Mexican American has its fair share of representation. It can always improve. We always need good people.
So your dad was a veteran of the Battle of the Bulge.
Yes, the Battle of the Bulge. Mhm. He got injured on I think it was Christmas Day 1944.
So he had to do a lot of research.
Right. I remember as a young teenager, we traveled through the Southwest, all these states, Arizona, New Mexico, and Texas, meeting people that he wrote about later on and getting their own firsthand experiences. He also met a man named Dr. Hector P. Garcia, who was the founder of the National Mexican American GI Forum. And that was a group that encouraged political involvement, but also a scholarship organization to give scholarships to deserving young Mexican Americans. And so I saw him get involved in that. And he became the first president of the American GI Forum.
And
So,
there's some sort of a monument or something in East LA or what's there?
well, yeah, my dad helped organize the Veterans Memorial Day celebration just for those veterans to celebrate the heroism of Mexican Americans and memorialize them. And so, because of that, after he died, the LA City Council passed a resolution to make him uh, to name the square after him. It's called Raul Morin Memorial Square, and the resolution said in perpetuity, and that means for you Roosevelt people, it means forever. Uh, and so there's been a big conflict and a disappointment because they're now trying to change the name of it and remove it and make it into a glorieta, so that there'll be easier access, which is not a bad thing, but they can't take the monument out. And so we're fighting against that. And we're inviting everybody else to come out on Veterans Day to come out and protest that and take part in uh, protesting the renaming of that. And we're going to pass out little goodies for people that come. I'd like to invite you to come. You can
Yeah,
come.
well,
November 11th.
please let me know the date. Remind me.
Yeah.
So where was that located?
It's on the intersection of Brooklyn. Well, I still call it Brooklyn. Cesar Chavez, Lorena, and Indiana, where they start. And it's 5 points. There's a supermarket there as well. I forget the name of it. I think it's Super A. Uh, so, and there's a big, tall, like a candle structure there, and you can remember. You won't miss it. You can
Cool.
recognize it.
Cool. Well, looks like I think we covered everything we hope to cover. Just give me some of your impressions and how you feel about being part of the East Side Sound in the 60s and what it all meant to you and how did it feel and your recollections. What would you like to say about it?
Well, today I can hardly remember a lot of things. It seems like a dream that I lived that life, but when I think back about it, it was a great glory day for me. I was at the height of our musical careers and I got to do and see and meet people that I would have never met before. And it was part of the scene where it was very popular and it was heady. It was like just like living a dream. And I'll never regret that. I'll always enjoy that, remember that. Thank you, Mark, for making it part of my experience too, and your influence and input and encouragement and your leadership. Thank you for that.
Welcome, man. Well, man, this has been great and thanks for doing the show. Appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. God bless you, and God bless everybody that listens to this.
Bye bye.
Bye now.